Okay, let's unpack this. Picture this. It's late 2009. The financial world's still kind of reeling, right?
Right. Still shaky.
And Warren Buffett's driving around his hometown, Omaha, with a friend who's, well, feeling pretty down about it all, sees all these empty storefronts.
Understandably so, yeah.
And his friend asks him, how does the economy ever recover from something like this? Makes sense.
A very valid question at the time.
And Buffett, in his classic way, just replies with another question. He says, Jim, do you know what the best-selling candy bar was back in 1962?
Okay. Where's he going with this?
Snickers. His friend says Snickers. And Buffett asks, and you know what the best-selling candy bar is today?
Still Snickers.
Still Snickers. And that simple story, for me anyway, it really kind of hits at the heart of what we're going to explore in this deep dive.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How that seemingly small observation points to something much bigger, a larger truth. That even when things feel like they're completely changing, massive upheaval, certain fundamental human things, behaviors, patterns, they stay remarkably consistent.
Yeah.
And for you, listening, the learner, trying to navigate all the information flying around,
Yeah.
that's got to be a kind of comforting thought, hasn't it? That there are these enduring principles you can hold on to.
Absolutely. So for this deep dive, our focus is Morgan Housel's book, Same as Ever, A Guide to What Never Changes. We're using the material you shared. Think of this as like your shortcut to understanding those lasting truths about how we live, how we deal with risk, why we react the way we do.
Getting to the core ideas.
Yeah, we're aiming for those moments where things just sort of click for you, without needing to wade through absolutely everything yourself.
And stepping back, the learner, what we're really aiming for here isn't about predicting the next big thing, because honestly, as we'll get into, those are often the things we just don't see coming anyway.
Right, the surprises.
Exactly. It's more about getting a deeper feel for those fundamental human responses to opportunity, fear, what drives us, things that have a long history, and, well, they aren't going away anytime soon. And that kind of understanding, that could be incredibly valuable for making sense of today and tomorrow.
It feels particularly relevant right now, doesn't it? The book's actually dedicated for the reasonable optimists.
I like that.
And it kicks off with a Carl Jung quote. Our life is indeed the same as it ever was. The same physiological and psychological processes that have been man's for hundreds of thousands of years still endure.
Wow. That really sets the stage, doesn't it, for looking at these deep-seated parts of us, what makes us human.
Totally. So what are some of these enduring themes we'll be digging into for you?
Well, the book covers a lot of ground, actually. Really important ideas. Things like how we see and handle risk.
Okay.
The often tricky relationship between our expectations and reality. What we think should happen versus what does.
Yeah, that gap.
The nature of the human mind itself. Fascinating. Sometimes irrational. Why trying too hard can sometimes backfire.
Interesting.
The surprising ways stress can actually be a catalyst for change. How we process good news versus bad news. The amazing power of small, consistent things compounding over time.
Compounding, always crucial.
The fact that competitive advantages often don't last forever. The real challenges behind true innovation. That gap between how we perceive things and how they actually are.
Perception versus reality.
The huge influence of incentives. The lasting impact of our own experiences.
Yeah.
And ultimately, why taking a long-term view is so important.
That's a great list.
We're going to explore each of these, pulling out what seems most, insightful for you.
Okay, perfect. Let's dive right into that first one then. Risk. It's always on our minds, isn't it?
Constantly.
And Housel makes this really strong point. The biggest risk is always what no one sees coming. He uses some powerful examples, starting, like we said, with that 2008 crisis that Buffett's story kind of framed.
And what's really striking about those examples, the learner, is just how limited we are in foreseeing these big disruptions.
It's humbling, really.
Take the Squaw Valley avalanche tragedy he mentions. These were experienced skiers, people who knew the risks, presumably.
Right.
But for whatever reason, they ignored warnings, maybe didn't see the unseen dangers, and tragically, well, they pay the ultimate price.
Yeah.
Or think about history. The American Revolutionary War, something as seemingly small as the wind changing direction could have completely altered the outcome. Just pure chance.
It's wild. And the Lusitania sinking is another one that really sticks with you.
Absolutely.
The fact that it was this combination, a delayed procedure in the boiler room, an unexpected submarine encounter, and the huge consequences that followed. potentially shaping the 20th century.
It really shows how much history pivots on these unpredictable moments.
Mm.
Chance, accidents, things you just can't plan for.
Right. We like to think we can plan for everything.
We do. We operate under this illusion of control. But as the book points out, we're actually pretty decent at forecasting the predictable stuff.
The day-to-day.
Yeah, except for the surprises, which tend to be all that matter. That's the killer quote.
Oof, yeah.
Carl Richards nails it too. Risk is what's left over after you think you've thought of everything. It's that unknown, the thing you haven't even considered. That's often the one that gets you.
Just think about recent history. COVID-19, 9/11, Pearl Harbor. These weren't just big events. They were massive surprises. They changed everything.
Exactly. And even the experts struggle. People whose whole job is forecasting.
Like the Economist example.
Yeah, the Economist. Known for looking ahead.
Yeah.
Didn't flag COVID in January 2020. Didn't flag the Ukraine invasion in January 2022, right before they happened.
And it's not about blaming them, right?
Yeah, at all. It's about highlighting the inherent difficulty, the fundamental unpredictability of these major shifts. As Housel puts it, there is rarely more or less economic uncertainty, just changes in how ignorant people are to potential risks.
That's a powerful way to frame it. Our ignorance changes, not the underlying uncertainty.
Precisely. We might feel like we have a handle on things, but it's often those blind spots, the things we're ignorant of, that cause the biggest problems.
It really makes you realize how narrow our own view can be. That comment from Roosevelt about historians thinking they'd find all the answers in his library. He knew so much context, so many unseen factors would just be missing from the record. You can't capture it all.
And Kahneman's quote drives it home. The idea that what you don't see might refute everything you believe just doesn't occur to us. It's just not how our brains naturally work.
We stick to what we know.
We operate within our framework, yeah. Often totally unaware of the vastness outside it. The Harry Houdini story is such a perfect, albeit tragic illustration.
Right. He could escape anything planned.
Anything he could anticipate. Chains, boxes, underwater. But it was an unexpected punch. Something completely unforeseen, unprepared for. That's what ultimately led to his death.
Wow.
Like the book says starkly, what you don't see coming always is.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. From risk to something we deal with constantly, expectations.
Ah, yes. Expectations.
Your Housel argues that expectations grow faster than circumstances, which leads to dissatisfaction even when things are actually getting better. That really hit me.
It's so true, isn't it? It's about how our internal benchmark, our yardstick, just keeps moving. It recalibrates constantly.
Like the 1950s example.
Exactly. We have this nostalgic glow around the 1950s in America. Widespread middle-class prosperity, right?
That's the image, yeah.
But the book points out the facts. Median inflation-adjusted wages are way higher today, homes back then, generally smaller. And people spend a much bigger chunk of their budget just on food, basic necessities.
Right. We forget the day-to-day realities. We romanticize it.
We do. And those contrasts Housel mentions. Viktor Frankl finding immense value in just a crumb of bread in the Holocaust.
Incredible perspective.
Or the author's friend from poverty in Africa just being blown away by the sheer abundance of food in America. It shows how fundamentally expectations shape how we see our circumstances.
Yeah, it's all relative.
And it's not just about stuff, about material things, is it?
No, definitely not.
Think about Will Smith talking about fame. How it starts amazing, then becomes kind of mixed, and can even feel like a burden eventually.
The expectation adjusts.
It adapts. Or Naomi Osaka, the tennis star, talking about sometimes not feeling joy even when winning huge tournaments. Once that peak becomes the norm, the baseline, its initial punch fades.
Even historical figures, like Truman.
Right, Harry Truman. When he first took office, people thought he was, well, not up to the job. Lots of criticism.
Widely underestimated.
But look now. Historians often rank him among the top presidents. Clearly, those initial expectations didn't match his actual performance or legacy.
It's a long game.
Which really brings us back to Charlie Munger's wonderfully simple advice, doesn't it?
Let me guess. Low expectations.
The first rule of a happy life is low expectations. It's about managing that internal benchmark so that when progress does happen, you actually appreciate it, instead of just meeting some ever-rising standard that leaves you always wanting more.
Manage the yardstick. Okay, now let's dive into the human mind itself. Always fascinating, often puzzling.
Endlessly fascinating, yes.
Housel makes this really sharp point. People who think about the world in unique ways you like also think about the world in unique ways you won't like.
That's a crucial insight. It's a reminder that brilliance often comes packaged with well, let's call them quirks.
Quirks, yeah. We tend to idealize successful people, don't we? Focus just on where they shine.
We put them on pedestals.
Yeah.
But the book gently reminds us, the learner, that the very mental wiring that lets them achieve amazing things in one area often comes with traits or views that are, let's say, less desirable in others.
Like the Eliud Kipchoge example.
Exactly. The marathon runner. His almost superhuman focus, his ability to be content with hours of silence. That's clearly not typical. His mental makeup is different.
And the John Boyd story? The fighter pilot?
Oh, Boyd. Revolutionized aerial combat tactics. Brilliant mind, but apparently notoriously difficult to work with. Rude, erratic, abrasive. The Air Force desperately needed his thinking. But personally, almost no one could stand him. His genius and his difficult personality were like two sides of the same coin. Inseparable.
And it's not just personality quirks, right?
No, not at all. Look at Isaac Newton. Towering figure in science, right? Laws of motion, gravity.
Foundational stuff.
But he also spent a huge amount of time on alchemy. Esoteric stuff. Or think about someone like Elon Musk today. Visionary achievements, no doubt. But they often come alongside unconventional, sometimes controversial behavior.
Yeah, it's a package deal often.
These examples suggest that the very traits fueling extraordinary accomplishments can be intertwined with things less universally admired. It's rarely neat and tidy.
The book also brings up our desire for certainty, how we crave it.
Oh, absolutely. We often prefer a definitive statement, something concrete, even if it's less accurate, over something probabilistic that admits uncertainty.
Like the bin Laden raid example, 50-50 odds.
Right. Reported as 50-50 for finding him, 50-50 for the raid's success. We tend to latch on to that kind of clear-cut number, even when the reality underneath is way more complex and uncertain.
We want black and white.
We do. And something else crucial to consider, the learner, is just the sheer scale of the world now. Billions of people.
Okay.
So even really rare events, things with like a 1 in a million chance on any given day, statistically, they're happening to thousands of people somewhere every single day, just because the pool is so massive.
So that contributes to the feeling that crazy things are always happening.
Exactly. It feels like we're living through unprecedented times, partly because we hear about more of those statistically inevitable rare events from all over the globe.
Which ties into the news cycle.
Precisely. We shifted from mainly local news to this 247 global fire hose. So we're constantly bombarded with potentially bad news from everywhere.
And bad news travels fast.
It grabs attention, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the statistical odds of something bad happening somewhere on the planet at any given moment are basically 100%. And we're more likely to hear about it now than ever before.
Makes sense. More pessimistic perception.
It can definitely skew perception. It connects to Munger's idea of the doubt avoidance tendency. We just don't like ambiguity. We want clear answers, even when we're trying to predict the inherently unpredictable future, or even fully grasp the messy past.
Right. Let's pivot again. Let's talk about stories. The power of narrative.
Ah, yes. This is a big one.
Housel makes a really strong case that often the best story wins, even over the cold, hard facts.
It's such a profound observation, isn't it, the learner? Think about MLK's I Have a Dream speech.
Iconic.
The whole speech was powerful, sure. But that impromptu part about the dream, supposedly prompted by Mahalia Jackson calling out.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's the story. And that part transformed a great speech into something truly historic. The personal story, the emotional connection that captured hearts and minds.
Wow. And Mark Twain reading his stuff aloud.
Yeah, think about how deliberate that was. Reading aloud, watching where the audience drifted. That focus on engagement, it highlights how crucial it is to connect, not just present information.
Like that saying, people don't remember books, they remember sentences.
Exactly. It's the memorable lines, the well-crafted narratives that stick.
Look at Harari's *Sapiens*.
Right. Huge bestseller. Even though at least one review pointed out it wasn't based on heaps of new original research.
So why so popular?
Because it told a compelling, sweeping story. He took existing knowledge and wove it into this incredible narrative about humanity. The writing, the storytelling was key.
And Ken Burns' The Civil War documentary.
Another perfect example. Masses of books already existed on the Civil War, countless facts. But Burns' documentary was a phenomenon.
Why?
The storytelling, visuals, music, the way the words aligned with the score. It created an emotional experience. Remember Stephen Hawking joking about equations cutting book sales in half?
Yeah, people connect with stories.
On a fundamental level, often more deeply than with raw data. Think about Churchill during the war.
Great orator.
His power wasn't just facts. It was his ability to craft narratives that rallied a nation. Even the stock market. Valuations aren't just numbers. They're tied to the stories we tell about a company's future.
So true.
Which leads to those great questions Housel poses. Who has the right answer? But I ignore because they're inarticulate.
Good question.
And what do I believe is true but is actually just good marketing? Really makes you think about the power of presentation.
Okay, now for those times when logic just seems to go out the window.
Ah, yes. When emotions take over.
Housel observes that logic is an invention of man and may be ignored by the universe.
A really crucial point to grasp, the learner. We often assume decisions are mostly rational, but history is just littered with examples where emotions, biases, irrational impulses, they play a much bigger role.
Like the Vietnam War example, Westmoreland's focus.
Yeah, General Westmoreland focusing on body counts, kill ratios.
Yeah.
A seemingly logical, data-driven approach.
Yeah.
But the American public, they were increasingly focused on the emotional toll, the casualties of their soldiers coming home. There's that story, maybe true, maybe not, about Ho Chi Minh basically saying, you kill 10 of mine for every one I kill of yours, but even at those odds, you will lose and I will win. A totally different, more emotional calculus of attrition.
Wow. And Hitler's Ardennes offensive.
The Battle of the Bulge, winter 1944. Logistically, it made almost no sense. His own generals mostly opposed it.
So why do it?
Seems like sheer irrationality. Detachment from reality, desperate hope overriding any logical military assessment with enormous tragic consequences.
But it's not always negative, right? Logic being overridden.
No, definitely not. Kipchoge again. His surprise win of the Tokyo Olympics marathon, the pre-race data suggested he was maybe past his peak.
But he won.
He won. It points to those unquantifiable things.
Yeah.
Determination, mental strength, the will to win, stuff that logic and data often can't fully capture.
Even in economics.
Yeah, per Byland's definition of economic value. Whatever someone wants has value, regardless of the reason, if any. It acknowledges that value is often subjective, emotional, not purely logical.
What about John Nash, the mathematician?
Right. Brilliant mind, Nobel Prize winner. But also suffered from schizophrenia, believed he got messages from aliens. It shows that profound insights can come from minds that don't operate within standard logical frameworks.
And financial bubbles.
Oh, classic example. Greed, fear. Powerful emotions fueled by compelling stories, often completely overwhelming any rational analysis of the underlying value.
So logic has its limits.
Big time. Trying to understand the world only through logic, you're going to miss a huge part of the picture. Human behavior is messy, emotional, complex.
Which leads nicely into this next idea, which feels a bit counterintuitive. Hyman Minsky's idea that stability is destabilizing.
Minsky's hypothesis, yeah, is really insightful for understanding boom and bust cycles, especially in finance, the learner.
So how does it work? Stability sounds good.
It feels good. But the core idea is that long periods of calm, of economic stability, they tend to make people more optimistic.
Okay.
And that optimism leads to a greater willingness to take on risk, more borrowing, more debt, more leverage.
Because things feel safe.
Exactly. But that buildup of debt and leverage, while it seems fine during the good times, actually makes the whole system more fragile, more vulnerable to shocks. So ironically, the lack of recessions, the stability itself can plant the seeds for the next big crisis.
It's that complacency kicking in.
Totally. Good times breed complacency. We start underestimating the chance of things going wrong because they haven't gone wrong for a while.
Like the pandemic preparedness example.
Yeah, the book mentions that. Relatively few major global pandemics in recent decades might have led to a false sense of security, underinvestment in public health infrastructure, making us more vulnerable when something like COVID did hit.
It's like we forget how bad things can get.
We do. And that other example is interesting too, record rain leading to record fires.
How does it work?
Yeah. Seems counterintuitive, right? But the heavy rain causes lots of vegetation growth. Then, when things get dry, all that extra growth becomes extra fuel for potentially much larger, more intense fires.
Yeah.
The initial stability, the abundance, creates the condition for a later, bigger crisis.
Stability breeds instability. Wow. Okay. Now let's talk about speed. Trying to go too fast.
Yes. The dangers of rushing things.
Housel uses that great Buffett quote.
Yeah.
You can't make a baby in 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant.
Classic Buffett. Simple, visual, and makes the point perfectly.
Which is?
That a good idea on steroids quickly becomes a terrible idea. There are natural limits, natural timelines for growth and development. Trying to force them, compress them, often leads to bad outcomes.
Like the examples of physical scaling limits.
Right. Robert Wadlow, the tallest man. Gigantism shows the physical stress of scaling a human body too fast, too big. And J.B.S. Haldane's examples with insects and mice, how scaling affected different creatures differently. A wet mouse is in trouble, a wet fly isn't, because of surface area to volume ratios. Scaling isn't simple.
And this applies to business and investing, too.
Oh, absolutely. That impatience for rapid growth, trying to compress timelines, it's behind so many blunders. Think about Starbucks' crazy expansion phase.
They were everywhere.
Exactly. Initially successful, but eventually. Market saturation, declining sales growth in existing stores. They pushed too hard, too fast. Harvey Firestone had it right decades ago. It does not pay to try to get the business all at once.
Patience is key.
And it's not just market limits. Management styles, company culture, things that work brilliantly in a small, agile startup often break down when the company gets huge. The culture doesn't scale, or the management approach becomes bureaucratic. Uber's early days are maybe an example of that friction.
Growth creates new problems.
It does. Even in nature, that fish growth experiment is telling. Force-feeding them for rapid early growth. Seems good, right?
Faster to market, maybe.
Yeah, but it led to shorter lifespans. Slower, more natural early growth resulted in longer, healthier lives overall. Robert Greene said it well. The greatest impediment to creativity is your impatience.
So rushing hurts quality, longevity.
Often, yes. Many things we value: strong relationships, deep expertise, sustainable businesses, long-term investments. They derive value from the time and effort invested. Often from scarcity, too. Rushing it, trying to mass-produce it instantly, often undermines the very thing you're trying to achieve.
Okay, shifting slightly but related.
Yeah.
Let's talk about stress, not as something purely negative, but as a catalyst.
Right. House argues stress focuses your attention in ways that good times can't.
How so? Give me an example.
Well, history offers plenty. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York, horrific tragedy.
Terrible story.
But the sheer horror and the public outrage, it became a major turning point. It galvanized the workers' rights movement, led to real, lasting safety regulations and labor law changes. The stress, the crisis, forced action.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly. Think about wartime innovations. Synthetic rubber, radar, huge leaps in aviation. These were driven by urgent, existential needs. The incentives are just different.
How do you mean?
Well, compare the motivation of, say, a Silicon Valley coder optimizing ad clicks with scientists during WWII working on radar or code breaking. The stakes are just astronomically different. If we don't solve this, we lose the war. That kind of stress creates an intensity, a focus, that's hard to replicate when things are comfortable.
Makes sense.
Toby Lutke from Shopify said, "Nothing can become truly resilient when everything goes right." And Taleb talks about the excess energy released from overreaction to setbacks being what drives innovation. Setbacks force adaptation.
Even the Great Depression example is surprising.
Right. You think of immense hardship, suffering, and that was absolutely true. But paradoxically, it was also a decade of significant productivity gains and technological progress in the U.S.
Driven by what?
Necessity. Huge infrastructure projects like the Pennsylvania Turnpike, Golden Gate Bridge got built. Rural electrification expanded massively. Factories had to become more efficient just to survive. Stress forced innovation.
And on a personal level.
The book notes that many highly successful people are driven by underlying anxiety, a fear of failure. They channel that stress into incredible focus and productivity. For some, the stick is a bigger motivator than the carrot.
Interesting. Okay, let's tackle the asymmetry between building things up and tearing them down.
Yes. Yeah. Creation versus destruction.
Housel puts it like this. Good news comes from compounding, which always takes time, but bad news comes from a loss in confidence or a catastrophic error that can occur in a blink of an eye.
It's a fundamental imbalance, isn't it, the learner? Think about progress in public health. Heart disease mortality down 70% since the 1950s. That's incredible.
Huge achievement.
But it's slow, steady, gradual. Doesn't make dramatic headlines day to day. Contrast that with the collapse of Lehman Brothers, bang, overnight. Or Enron imploding. Or even the Soviet Union dissolving relatively quickly.
Things built over decades, gone in months or years.
Exactly. Things painstakingly built over long periods can unravel with shocking speed. There's resistance to growth competition, setbacks. But decline, as the book says, everyone gets out of the way of decline, it can accelerate fast.
It's like the human body analogy.
Yeah, creating a human. Billions of complex, precise steps over months, ending it. Can be as simple as cutting off oxygen for a few minutes. Harari's point about peace versus war echoes this. Peace requires almost everyone cooperating. War can start with just one side making a bad choice.
So progress feels slow and destruction feels fast?
And that's why long-term progress often gets discounted or underestimated. Our brains aren't wired to intuitively grasp the power of slow, steady compounding over decades. Saying wealth will double in 50 years sounds less impressive than it is compared to 1.4% growth this year, even though they describe the same reality.
Which leads right into the next idea, tiny and magnificent.
Exactly, where little things compounding become extraordinary.
The Tsar Bomba example fits here.
In a terrifying way, yes. The most powerful nuke ever detonated. It shows how seemingly contained risks, when scaled up or combined, can have consequences far beyond what anyone initially imagined. Massive, unforeseen impact.
And this applies to disasters, too, not just bombs.
Yeah, the book argues major disasters, the Great Depression, COVID, are rarely single, freak, low-probability events. More often, they're the result of several smaller, maybe higher probability risks, all happening around the same time.
A perfect storm.
Kind of. They interact, feed off each other, compound in complex ways. A financial vulnerability meets a supply chain shock, meets a political instability, and boom, the whole system gets stressed.
So expect things to break.
Housel suggests it's reasonable to assume the world will break in some significant way about once a decade, precisely because of this compounding nature of smaller, interconnected risks. It's not being pessimistic, maybe just realistic about complexity.
And the ultimate example of compounding.
Evolution, arguably. Billions of years. Tiny genetic tweaks accumulating, adapting, leading to the incredible complexity of life we see. It's mind-boggling. Albert Bartlett was right. Humans just don't intuitively get the exponential function.
How does this play out in investing?
Well, think about it. An investor who gets consistently good returns, maybe not the absolute best each year, but steadily good and, crucially, avoids big losses.
The blow-ups.
Right. Over the long haul, they can easily outperform someone who chases sky-high returns but suffers huge drawdowns occasionally. Consistency, sustained over time, is incredibly powerful due to compounding.
So the key question isn't just, how high can my returns be?
Exactly. It's more like, what are the best returns I can realistically sustain for the longest period of time? That's where the real magic of compounding happens.
Okay, this next one feels important. Balancing optimism and pessimism.
Ah, yes, the coexistence of opposites.
Housel argues that real progress needs both. You can't just be one or the other.
It's a really nuanced but critical point, the learner. The best strategy often isn't pure optimism or pure pessimism. It's applying both strategically in different areas.
Like the finance example.
Yeah, the book suggests a great framework. Save like a pessimist and invest like an optimist.
Meaning,
believe in long-term growth, innovation, prosperity that invests with that optimistic view. But simultaneously, prepare for setbacks. Save diligently, manage debt carefully, assume things will go wrong. Sometimes that's the pessimistic prudence.
it's interesting that the American dream idea surged during the Depression.
Isn't that striking? A time of incredible hardship, despair, yet this optimistic vision of opportunity gained traction. It shows how vital optimism can be as a source of hope, motivation, even when reality looks bleak.
And Bill Gates, optimist or pessimist?
Both. That's the point.
Yeah.
Incredible optimistic vision for technology, relentless drive,
Built Microsoft.
but paired with an almost paranoid, pessimistic focus on always having a huge cash cushion. Enough to survive a year with no revenue was the story. Taking calculated risks like an optimist, but managing the finances like a pessimist, ready for the worst.
So be a rational optimist.
Exactly. Acknowledge setbacks are inevitable, things will go wrong, but maintain faith and long-term progress. You need to survive the short-term bumps to enjoy the long-term growth. That requires both optimism about the destination and pessimism about the journey's difficulties.
Okay, this next one feels counterculture almost. There is a huge advantage to being a little imperfect.
Goes against the grain, doesn't it? Our obsession with optimization, perfection.
Totally. But how is imperfection an advantage?
Look at evolution again, the learner. Species that become hyper-specialized, perfectly adapted to one specific environment. They thrive there.
Sounds good.
Until the environment changes, even slightly. Then they're incredibly vulnerable. A bit of inefficiency, a broader toolkit, less perfect adaptation, often means greater resilience, ability to survive change. There's no single perfect adaptation for all possible futures.
So flexibility over perfection.
In many cases, yes. And think about creativity. The book mentions the value of wasting time.
Wasting time is good.
Amos Tversky thought so, the psychologist. He said the secret to good research is being a little underemployed. You need slack, unstructured time to let ideas percolate. You waste years by not being able to waste hours.
Like George Shultz's Schultz hour.
Exactly. Dedicated time just to think. No agenda. Even just taking a walk is proven to boost creative thinking. It's not efficient in a narrow sense, but it's effective.
How does this apply to investing or business?
Well, holding some cash in a bull market seems inefficient. It's not working hard. But it provides safety, optionality when markets turn down, diversification. Some assets will always underperform. Looks inefficient, but it reduces overall risk.
So a bit of slack is good.
It can be crucial, even forecasting. Striving for good enough predictions might be way more efficient than chasing perfect accuracy, which is often impossible anyway. Frees up resources for focusing on more important, enduring principles. The relentless pursuit of perfection can make you fragile.
Which ties into the idea of effort and avoiding shortcuts.
Right. Housel says bluntly, everything worth pursuing comes with a little pain. The trick is not minding that it hurts.
No pain, no gain.
Essentially, think of the Donner Party story. Tragic. They took what they thought was a shortcut west.
The Hastings cutoff.
Right. Ended in disaster. Trying to bypass the known, harder route had terrible consequences. Sometimes the established path, the one involving effort, is the right one for a reason.
And this idea of optimal bullshit.
Yeah, it's a memorable phrase. It's the idea that you just have to accept a certain amount of friction, hassle, inefficiency as part of life, part of getting things done in the real world.
Trying to eliminate all friction is futile.
Or even counterproductive. The book gives that example of the CEO losing his temper over minor travel glitches. Maybe someone with zero tolerance for the inevitable small hassles that come with, well, anything complex. An unrealistic expectation of perfect smoothness.
So accept some level of annoyance.
To many things, yes. The price of admission for achieving something worthwhile often includes putting up with an optimal amount of hassle, discomfort, setbacks. Trying to find a completely smooth, painless shortcut often leads you nowhere, or worse.
Okay, let's talk about staying on top. Competitive advantages.
Ah, yes, the harsh reality. Most competitive advantages eventually die.
Nothing lasts forever.
Pretty much. Look at nature again. Cope's rule species tend to get bigger over evolutionary time. Seems like an advantage, right? Bigger, stronger.
Makes sense.
But being too big can also be a disadvantage if the environment changes. Food scarcity, new predators. It shows how advantages are often temporary, context-dependent.
Like the Sears story in retail.
Classic example. Sears, Roebuck, dominated American retail for decades. Mail order, then department stores. Seemed unassailable.
And now?
A shadow of its former self.
Yeah.
Why? Complacency, probably. Changing customer tastes. New, nimbler competitors like Walmart, then Amazon. Just being overtaken by changes in the world. Even huge advantages erode.
So you can't rest on your laurels.
Absolutely not. That leads to Van Valen's Red Queen hypothesis from Alice in Wonderland.
The Red Queen?
Yeah. She tells Alice, here, you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. You have to keep adapting, keep innovating, just to maintain your position because everyone else is running too. Competition never stops.
Applies to business, careers.
Everything. Products, relationships. And think about how we react to new tech. That cycle Hells mentions.
What cycle?
Initial disbelief or dismissal. That'll never work. Then gradual adoption. Then it becomes essential, taken for granted. And finally, often calls for regulation. This thing is too powerful. It shows how advantages shift and perceptions shift with them.
And predicting the next big thing is hard.
Notoriously hard. Edison's optimistic but ultimately limited view of 1908's tech future, or the huge unforeseen impact of the first wireless message. We consistently underestimate the potential of small beginnings. In emergent effects, combinations of small things creating massive, unpredictable change constantly disrupt the status quo.
So the takeaway is adapt or die.
In a business context, pretty much. Relying on a past advantage is risky. Continuous adaptation, innovation, staying alert. That's key for long-term survival.
Okay, now about how things appear versus how they are.
Right. The idea that things are often harder than it looks and not as fun as it seems.
The curated version of reality.
Exactly. People, companies.
Yeah.
We see the polished version, the learner, the success is highlighted, the struggle's hidden. It's like the window dressing.
The iceberg analogy.
Perfect analogy. We see the tip, the success, the ease. We don't see the massive bulk underwater.
Yep.
The years of effort, the failures, the doubts, the sheer grind.
And that can be discouraging.
It can. If you only see others' seemingly effortless success, you might think, I could never do that, or they must have some secret I don't. It underestimates the universal reality of struggle behind most achievements.
And incentives play a role here too.
Huge role. Incentives drive behavior in powerful, sometimes unexpected ways. They can make people do things that seem crazy from the outside, or justify actions that seem wrong.
Like the pizza guy turned mortgage banker.
Yeah, that anecdote illustrates it perfectly. The financial incentives during the housing bubble were so strong, they pulled people into roles and behaviors they might never have considered otherwise. James Clear nailed it. People follow incentives, not advice.
Even supporting criminals like El Chapo.
Extreme example, but yes.
Yeah.
If a drug lord brings jobs, money, infrastructure to a poor community, the incentives for local support can, disturbingly, outweigh moral objections for some. Incentives are incredibly powerful shapers of reality.
But nothing beats firsthand experience, right?
Nothing. It can completely overwrite prior beliefs. The book gives strong examples. The German civilian experiencing hyperinflation, then seeing Hitler rise, changes your whole worldview.
Or the Gulag prisoners, soldiers in combat.
Profound, transformative experiences. They show how quickly perspectives can shift under intense pressure or direct experience, and even positive experiences, achieving a huge goal. The reality can be different than expected.
Like walking on the moon, Aldrin and Bean.
Yeah, Aldrin's magnificent desolation. Bean's reported, "Is that all there is?" It suggests that even achieving the ultimate dream, the emotional reality, the what now, can be complex. Expectations recalibrate constantly.
So things are messier and harder than they look from outside.
Almost always. First-hand experience reveals the hidden complexity, the struggle, and the often surprising emotional landscape behind achievements.
Which brings us to thinking long-term, really committing.
Right. Housel's analogy is great. Saying I'm in it for the long run is a bit like standing at the base of Mount Everest pointing to the top and saying, that's where I'm heading. Well, that's nice. Now comes the test. The climb. The hard part. The reality check.
Like Elizabeth Taylor's divorce quote.
Exactly. Saying her marriage would last 10 more years, days before filing for divorce, shows the massive gap that can exist between intention and the messy reality of navigating the long term.
And the difference between expiring and permanent information.
Crucial distinction. Expiring information is the daily news, market chatter, short-term data. It shouts for attention but fades quickly.
Noise.
Often, yes. Permanent information is different. Enduring principles, human nature, historical patterns. It doesn't expire. It compounds. It gives you the why, not just the what. Focusing on that provides deeper, more lasting understanding.
Okay, almost there. Let's talk about trying too hard.
The counterproductivity of overcomplication.
Tells a simple line. There are no points awarded for difficulty.
Love that. Focus on results, effectiveness, not just how complex or hard something seems, the learner.
Like the cancer research example.
Yeah. Harold Varmus, the Nobel laureate, pointed out the paradox. Massive focus on complex, high-tech treatments, while maybe underemphasizing simple, highly effective prevention, like quitting smoking. Robert Weinberg, another top researcher, echoed that prevention is arguably the most impactful strategy, even if less intellectually glamorous for researchers.
We're drawn to complexity.
Dijkstra, the computer scientist, said it. Simplicity is the hallmark of truth. We should know better, but complexity continues to have a morbid attraction.
Like comparing the Constitution to a mortgage contract.
Exactly, the Constitution. Foundational principles, relatively simple language, modern mortgage contract or tax code. Often incredibly dense, complex, almost designed to obscure.
Why?
Sometimes complexity is needed for nuance, but often a few simple variables drive most of the outcome. Extra complexity can be filler, or worse, deliberate obfuscation. And sometimes complexity just feels more sophisticated, gives an illusion of control. Simplicity can be mistaken for ignorance.
So aim for effective simplicity.
Right, like the baseball outfielder catching a fly ball. Complex physics calculation happening almost instantly, intuitively. The simple action wraps up deep understanding. It's not about being simplistic, it's about mastering the complexity so well it looks simple.
Like the young doctor misdiagnosing.
Yeah, overthinking, chasing rare, complex diseases instead of the simple, obvious answer right in front of them. Trying too hard, being too clever can lead you down the wrong path.
Okay, final point. The lasting impact of experiences. Scars.
Yes, wounds heal, scars last. A powerful concluding thought.
The Pentagon example after 9/11 illustrates this.
Perfectly. The learner. The physical damage to the building was repaired relatively quickly. The wound healed. But the scars. The permanent, pervasive security measures at every airport, the shift in geopolitical focus, those lasted. Traumatic events reshape behavior, policy, perspective long after the event itself.
And different experiences create different perspectives.
Fundamentally, if you live through hyperinflation, you'll think about money differently than someone who hasn't. If you experienced war firsthand, your view on conflict will be shaped by that scar. Many debates are really just people talking past each other because their formative experiences, their scars, are completely different. They operate from different baseline assumptions about how the world works.
Like the WWII generation or the Depression generation?
Exactly. The sheer scale of suffering in WWII, especially on the Eastern Front, left indelible marks. Studies show lasting impacts on health, relationships, financial habits for those who lived through the Depression or major wars. Frederick Lewis Hallen noted the lifelong caution with money in the Depression generation. Hamilton Fish Armstrong described the deep scars in post-war Europe.
These experiences reset expectations.
Permanently. They change ingrained behaviors, reshape your understanding of risk, of stability, of what's possible. As Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. said, a mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions. The scar tissue remains.
So, wrapping this all up, this deep dive into same as ever, what are the big takeaways, the core themes for you, the learner?
Well, if you boil it all down, it comes back to a few key things, doesn't it? First, that fundamental human behavior, our psychology, our biases, is remarkably consistent, even as the world changes wildly around us.
The same as ever part.
Exactly. Then, the crucial need to understand risk, especially the hidden, unseen kind, and to manage our own expectations because they shape our reality so much.
Risk and expectations, got it.
The complex, often irrational nature of our own minds. How logic and emotion are always intertwined in our decisions.
Mind, logic, emotion.
The incredible, often underestimated power of compounding over long periods. Small things adding up. And the flip side, the danger of impatience, of trying to rush things.
Compounding and patience.
The need for resilience. How stress and setbacks, while painful, are often catalysts for growth and innovation. And how advantages rarely last without constant adaptation.
Resilience, adaptation.
And finally, the profound, lasting impact of our own individual experiences. Those scars in shaping how we see and navigate the world.
That's a great summary. And our hope, the learner, is that exploring these ideas gives you a useful framework, a way to look beyond the daily noise, get a grasp on those deeper forces always at play, hopefully sparking some aha moments without the info overload.
And maybe as a final thought to mull over, the learner, consider those questions Housel leaves us with. Like, who have valuable insights, but you ignore them because they aren't great communicators? Or which of your current strong beliefs might be totally different if you were born somewhere else or in another time?
Perspective check.
And maybe most challenging,
Yeah.
what do you desperately want to be true? So much that you might be ignoring evidence that it isn't.
Oof. Tough questions.
They are. But asking them can be a powerful starting point for deeper self-awareness and more nuanced understanding of yourself and this complicated, ever-changing, yet somehow always the same world.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Until our next exploration.